So just to prove to everybody that I'm a real boy, I'm going to try this one-handed. It works. Hey guys, welcome back to Triple F Shooting. Today we are going to be looking at the largest handgun that we have in the arsenal, and that is the Super Redhawk in 454 Casull. This is made by Ruger, and this thing is a handful. Alright, so this is more of a man test than an accuracy test, and I think I'm going to fail it, but these are 454 Casull. I believe they are the 240 grain, but these are Hornady's. And they got some kind of cool jelly inside the bullet. Not real sure why. I think it's to help with expansion of the round. I know the XTPs that I've used on a deer, they expand a lot, like more than you want. So I'm not sure if these are any different. I have yet to take a deer with one of these, but I'm gonna load 6, and I'm only at 15 yards, but I'm gonna be freehand, and I'm gonna shoot that target for accuracy and see how much my accuracy falls apart under recoil and flinch and all of that good stuff that I'm going to really try not to do. So here we go. So luckily, Ruger puts a Hogue grip on this thing because it does stomp quite a bit. It actually comes with an original grip that's shorter, almost like the single action army grip, but it's rubberized with a wood panel. This one is much more comfy, and that part is the most important for where it's smashing into your hand. Very heavy gun, which helps with the recoil. There is no muzzle brake or anything like that. Oddly enough, I have shot a 460 Smith & Wesson, and the 460 actually kicks a little bit less due to the compensator and the weight of the gun. So out of any gun I've ever fired, and I've never shot like 500 line ball or anything crazy like that, but this is the heaviest recoiling revolver that I've ever shot. We're at 15 yards. We're going to do everything in single action just to take the extra trigger yank out of it for me. So either the sights are low or I dipped. We'll see what happens. That was terrible. Yeah. So, as you can see, freehand, I'm pulling the gun a little bit low. I started off okay, but started to get a little bit shaky on the last two and yanked them low. The first couple are within about a fist. If you take the whole group, it's not god-awful, minus like maybe a flyer, but this is a get your shot off on the first couple kind of gun, at least for me. Alright guys, so other than this thing feeling like someone just hitting you in the hand with a baseball bat or something, it's actually a pretty interesting firearm. Everybody's kind of got a thing for heavy recoiling giant hand cannons, or at least it's fun to watch other people get beat up by them to some extent. When I was younger, I thought this was way cooler than I do now, mainly for the hunting purposes, but after that first deer I took with it, I don't know how much more I'll use this unless I get to ever go on like a hog hunt or maybe black bear or something like that. But definitely a neat firearm to have hanging around. So this particular firearm was made, I believe, in the late 80s by Ruger, and interestingly enough, it was to address kind of some strength issues that the original Redhawk has. The Redhawk has been around for a while and was kind of direct competition to the Smith & Wesson Model 29. If you heard an exasperated breath, my dog is already bored of me, so just be aware that he is under my feet. But anyway, the Super Redhawk was built, as you can see, with this frame extension that some people think is really cool looking. I tend to think it's sort of on the ugly side, but it just makes the gun look kind of tanky, so I can appreciate it. But what that does is extends the amount of thread that the barrel gets to the frame and adds a lot of strength. And as you can probably tell, this is a honking barrel. So let's get into more of the gun itself, and then we can talk about the round, do some shooting, and watch my hand get punished. Alright guys, pardon the audio change, but we haven't had any snuggle vision in a while, so I figure we'll bring the gun up close to the camera and look at it instead of looking at my mug from a distance. So we're going to start up on the muzzle end, and as you can see, that is a fairly thick barrel because we have quite a bit of energy coming out of this thing, and that's going to help with accuracy. We have a ramp front sight with a red highlight, and the most fun part is the big stupid lawyer crap down the side. I hate it, but that's just me. I think it ruins the aesthetic of the gun having all that written there, but that's not really what it's about. It's for hunting and stuff, so I will get over myself. Along the top, you can see we have cutouts for a scope mount, which is really cool, except for we bought the gun used, and you can see that whoever had it tightened it so hard that they actually took some chunks out. So I will not be most likely mounting a scope to it in that fashion because I don't know if I trust that anymore. Which first deer I took with this was with the irons, so we'll see how it goes. As I age and need optics more and more, I'll probably have to figure something out, or maybe trade or something like that, but we got it a lot cheaper because of it, so is what it is. You can see that the frame extension stops right here where the barrel meets it. We have a shrouded ejector to keep that nice and safe. We also have no flutes in the cylinder because the sidewalls of the thing need to be quite a bit thick so that they can withstand all that chamber pressure. This one is, if I can do this all one-handed, we're empty, but you can see it is a 6-shot, and we have some fairly thick sidewalls, even with that 6-shot. Once you get into the really big stuff, like 460 and 500, you actually go to a 5-shot and have even thicker sidewalls, but this one can handle the pressure just fine. You'll also notice that we are marked for 45 Colt and 454 Casull. We'll get into that in a little bit. The rear sight is just a fully adjustable boxed notch that has some green paint on it, still from the original owner. You have a push button for your cylinder release. So Colts, you have the pull type Smith & Wesson, you push forward, and on the Ruger you actually push it in toward the side of the gun to release the cylinder. The trigger pull on this thing is not terrible. In double action it's probably around 9 pounds, I would guess. In single action you're braking just under 4, and it's very crisp. You can see the amount of chamber movement, or I'm sorry, the trigger movement. So you take up pretty much all of that thing. And we'll go ahead and squeeze her off. It's very crisp, very little movement, and a nice clean break. And that's going to be really important because this thing is a flinch creator, and you want that trigger to be kind of out of the way and not a problem so you can focus on holding still. The hammer is low set with some nice knurling so you can get to it really easy. And we have Hogue mono grips to eat up all that recoil. Alright, so now that we've had a close-up of the gun and everything, we can talk a little bit about shooting characteristics. As you would expect, being that it is a revolver and it isn't a heavy recoiling round, it's quite a bit to hang on to. It is not anything absolutely terrible, but when you're shooting fairly hot 454 Casull loads, you're going to end up with, you know, after about 6 rounds, I'm starting to get tired of it. Like, not something I'm going to go buy 40 rounds of and just bang away all day. It is fun. It's interesting to hang on to this much gun. Your pressures are up somewhere around 60,000 psi, so you're cranking along. But probably a gun you're going to want to find a 45 Colt loading and go ahead and shoot that for your practice and all that stuff, and then leave your sighting in to the exact round you're going to be using and try to make it as quick as you can and do things like brace the thing up to eliminate that flinch factor, because after a while you're probably going to develop flinch with this thing if you are shooting full house rounds just over and over and over. But that brings us to the cartridge. Ooh, couple points that I forgot when we were talking about the gun itself. I did not add the actual weight of the thing or the finish that's on it. It is finished in like an all-weather gray, and so far that seems to be holding up really, really well. I've had this for a number of years and have never had any issue with it. I don't, I'm not hard on my guns by any stretch, and I do oil them up, but I don't deep clean them very often, and this finish is pretty nice. The weight on this thing is a factor that helps, but it's not nearly as heavy as, say, a 460 or 500 Magnum. We're talking about 48 ounces, so no muzzle brake or anything like that. I actually think this gun kicks harder than a 460, and we'll get one on the channel eventually. We actually have one in our family and shoot these things side by side to show off the recoil. That muzzle brake on a 460 or 500 does wonders. So this thing stomps even with that weight, but it's enough weight to help hold on target if you're not staying up freehand for too long, and it does absorb a lot of that recoil. Alright, speaking of recoil, the bullet. So the bullet actually comes from a 45 Colt. So off the top of my head, Dick Casull, I did it, made this thing back in the late 50s as kind of a wildcat round. If you are not familiar with what the term wildcat is, it is basically when someone takes a bullet and pushes it beyond its intended pressures to see what they can come up with. 44 Magnum was created that way. There are quite a few wildcat rifle rounds that are not in common circulation. You have to reload for them, but people make them, and the caliber exists and has its own kind of dimensions and specs that you can go find if you were to want to get into that. Most people don't mess with it because it's a lot of work and you really got to love what you're doing. So 1958, I think it was, late 50s, Dick Casull comes up with the 454 Casull, but it doesn't actually become prevalent or reach factory settings until like the 90s. So I think it's 93, 97, somewhere in there. Might be 93. And then this particular gun is chambered in it in 97. So 45 Colt out of this thing, since the 454 was developed from 45 Colt, 460 is as well. But since the larger of these two can be shot in this gun, it works a whole lot like 357 Magnum or 44 Magnum, where in a 357 I can shoot 38, 44 Magnum I can shoot 44 Special, in a 454 I can shoot 45 Colt. So that helps tremendously if I just have a hankering to shoot the thing and I don't want to spend, $2-3 a round, even though 45 Colt's probably over $1 a round these days. And if you decide that the 454 is just too stompy, you can get some seriously hyped up 45 Colt ammo that has, a little less recoil but still putting out plenty of power to take a deer or a boar or something like that. Anywho, these cowboy loads are run at about 800 feet per second, so the pressure is pretty low on these. I think it's under 20,000 psi by quite a bit. These 454 loads are running, the box says it, 50 feet per second, shy of 2,000 feet per second, so we're running 1950, and these are 200 grain, so these are actually pretty fast. I think the 240s I had were running at 1,600, but velocity and bullet weight are always the kind of seesaw you use to get your foot poundage, so these are a little lighter, but they're a whole lot faster, and the pressures are tremendously hotter than a 45 Colt round. So we've actually got a recoil roulette video that some of you may have already seen the short, but that'll kind of explain the difference between the rounds. Alright guys, today we'll be playing recoil roulette. I'm not looking. Alright. See if you can tell which one kicks harder.
is horrible. Oh God. Well, it's the last one. That was a big difference. Yeah, somehow I spun that to, that was perfect. Those 45 Colts out of this thing literally feel like shooting, like everyone always says, like shooting a 22. It's slightly more than a 22, but the gun's so heavy it barely does anything at all. That last one stomped a bit. Let's go look at the case size difference. There we go. So out of the run, not really that easy to tell an enormous difference between the rounds. So what you've got going here is sort of a 38 Special 357 Magnum sort of thing, where they lengthen the case and up the pressure considerably, but I believe the case length is more so you don't cram one of these in your single action army or something and literally blow the thing to pieces.
All right. So to keep me from just like rambling all over the place about the round itself and the various different chamberings, or I'm sorry, cartridge setups that you can get, basically your average run-of-the-mill loadings, you're going to find, like, these are on the light side at 200 grain, and you can go all the way up into 400 that I've seen, you know, semi-regularly. This is not something that's just everywhere, and they're very expensive, so not a plinking round by any means, but from 200 all the way up to 400 grain, and then that's going to give you speeds from anywhere around 2,000 feet per second like these, all the way down on that 400 grain side around 1,400 feet per second, which that's still pretty hot for a handgun round, especially that heavy. So the recoil is going to go up considerably as you increase your bullet weight. Now, most people that hunt have a general idea of this or know this really well. I am by no means any kind of expert, but velocity is not the only thing to chase. So just to give you some comparisons, most people are familiar with a 5.56 NATO, the round the military uses. It's a rifle cartridge, extremely light but going very, very fast. That's going to give you about 1,300 foot-pounds of energy. This particular thing, in a 200 grain going almost 2,000 feet per second, is giving me just under 1,800 foot-pounds. So this thing's hitting harder than a 223 or a 5.56 rifle, which that's maybe not the most impressive thing, but this is out of handgun, so that's pretty cool. Then, to give you a little more perspective, this sits kind of between 44 Magnum and 460 Smith & Wesson Magnum. 44 mag, when loaded up, like a plus P plus round, is going to give you, check my notes real quick, about 1,500 foot-pounds of energy off of that loading. I think that was a Buffalo Bore plus P plus. The 454, like we just discussed, on the high end, regardless of how you do velocity versus bullet weight, you're looking at the best you can do, or at least a high average is around that 2,000 foot-pounds. So quite a bit more than 44 mag. But then when you get into 460, you blow this out of the water. On the high end, you can get about 3,000 foot-pounds. So you're talking just crazy, crazy amounts of energy for a handgun. And then surprisingly, 500 Smith & Wesson, even though you can get much heavier rounds, is only, you know, it's generally in the same range as that 460. So 460 you can shoot very far and flat, considering it's a handgun. The 500, you've got a whole lot more penetration power because you can get such heavy bullets. So everything, especially when hunting, comes down to what are you hunting? Do you need to go really deep into it, say a boar or a bear or something where you have to get far enough in to hit vitals? Or is it a smaller, you know, not small game, but a medium game animal where I'm looking to, you know, get through light layer of skin, do good damage to the internals, and get back out without, like, ripping the bullet apart? If you have anything for deer and you really, really don't want to hear about one getting shot, this is the point of the video where you're going to want to leave. Because the one animal that I have taken with this 454, I will probably never use Hornady XTPs again. That was gnarly. This thing hit that doe like a truck. I've seen pretty stout rifles put deer down, you know, just drop them instantaneously. I was about 20 yards from this deer, quartered away, went in behind the shoulder, and actually caught the other shoulder, and it just right on down and blew up a great deal of that shoulder. It was about the best shot placement I could get on that particular animal, and lost a lot of meat up here because the bullet just shredded out and smoked a bunch of pieces of the shoulder. It actually came apart almost on impact. So I would prefer to have something maybe more monolithic where you don't have jacketing and stuff to come out and separate, and something that's going to hold together well, because it's a lot of power and you don't really want it to turn into a bomb inside that animal and shred a bunch of the meat that you're trying to get out of it. Okay, if you listen through that horrific animal story and you're still hanging around, some final thoughts with the 454, specifically in this Ruger. This is a super stout handgun. I have no worries that this is going to hold up for a very long time. Ruger's kind of known for that if you're into their Blackhawks and stuff like that. Even their Vaqueros, the cowboy action guns, are much heavier built and can withstand a whole lot more punishment than something like a Colt single action or anything like that. There are plenty of single action firearms chambered in 454. They tend to get fairly pricey. To me, this is a really, really high value piece of equipment if you really need to get up into, you know, really big bore, high recoil, high energy rounds. Ruger's pretty good at that. Seems like just about everything they do is a high value and can stand quite a bit of punishment. I really like this revolver. This is not one we shoot a ton. Again, extremely expensive ammo and fairly punishing recoil if you're going to do it all the time. But lastly, big and heavy. Need to carry it. Not sure how much is this going to show. Maybe right there. But this is a Galco shoulder holster that is actually meant for a Smith & Wesson Model 29 in a 4-inch barrel. So you can see I'm not protecting the end of my barrel or my front sight, but if you need to haul the thing around, this is typically how I do it. I started off with a great big like shoebox looking holster that just like engulfs the entire gun and you just reach into a large pouch to get the thing out. But I actually like how accessible this thing is. If we ever go elk hunting again and I'm worried about bear or something like that, maybe not a popular opinion, I think bear mace is more effective than big handgun, but you know, if you wanted to, this is fairly quick to snap and draw, even though it is meant for a little bit smaller gun. So if you are looking for a holster to carry that around, the Galco shoulder setup meant for a Model 29 4-inch works pretty well. With all that said, which was a lot of rambling, thank you for watching Triple F Shooting. It's been a really cool couple of weeks. We have boosted quite a bit, and I want to thank everybody for that. It's a pretty neat feeling to watch things actually start to grow. But I won't cry or anything like that if that's what you're hoping for. Unless you get on my OnlyFans. I don't have one. Don't look that up. But thanks again for watching Triple F Shooting, and we'll see you next time.
Got a 454, 200 grain Hornady round going about 2,000 feet per second. I think I soaked my camera.